cover it, put the dope on it to tighten it, and it was out the door. But what happened was, is in the case of the Fokker D7 over there, the whole thing was lozenge. It was called lozenge fabric. When it came out, it would go to the front, and then the fighter pilots would paint all these gaudy things up there. So, anyway, if you're tall enough and you can actually look inside the cockpit, please don't bang my fuselage with a camera or something. But if you can peek in, you'll actually see we covered the airplane originally with the lozenge fabric, and then we painted it over brushed it like they would have done at the front, so it's got the original fabric on the inside. In fact, even, you know, if you can't look in the cockpit, if you go back and you look just forward of the tail on the side of the fuselage, you'll see that we painted the original factory numbers on there, and then we painted over them. But you can see through them. So anyway, so this was originally, the first Albatrosses probably came out around 1916. This was the last model they built. This is a D5A. This has got the big Mercedes. It's 200 horsepower. This airplane and the Snipe were both built by the Vintage Aviator Limited, Peter Jackson's company down in New Zealand. They did a great job. I did a trade, and the deal was the two airframes, and then they overhauled the engines, which were mine. So the starting process of this thing is going to be interesting. There's a cam lifter up there that actually helps in the starting. So Paul's probably already lifted the cam back there, but he's got to stand up on the wheel. Somebody asked, can you start the airplane yourself? Well, this will prove to you that you can't. So basically, he stood up there, he's got that thing up there, and when I started, he's got to stand on the wheel because he's got to drop it back down again for, you know, getting power out of the engine. Then there's 6 priming cups for the cylinders. Instead of having to squirt up this way, there's actually a little cup there. He opens them up, he's going to squirt fuel in each one of them, he's going to close them off. I'm going to sit in the cockpit, and this has got there's got a water pump on the bottom of this, and there's actually a canister with a screw in the cockpit with grease in it. And every 10 minutes when I'm flying, I got to squeeze it to make sure I got pressure to keep the pump lubricated, okay? So it's a little bit crude, but effective. So anyway, so I'm doing that. This actually has a carburetor. So this one I'm going to be idled pretty low. It's a water-cooled engine. You can see where the radiator is in the top wing here, and everybody knows that there's less pressure on the top of the wing and more pressure on the bottom. So they did that. It actually sucks the airplane, or sucks the air through, and the little top up there is kind of an overflow, so there's a little bit of a cup up there that pressurizes it. But if it basically, you get an overboil or something like that, it overheats, it'll blow out over there. And when they first did it, it was in the middle. That was not a good idea. So after they sprayed a few pilots, they moved it over to the side. And if you get a chance later, come over here and you can look, you can actually see that the radiator shutters that are under the wing there, I reach outside the cockpit when I'm flying and adjust them, okay? So not only can I adjust the radiator out there, my airspeed is over here on the side with a little anemometer. The D7's got the same airspeed. So if I have to look at the airspeed, I look outside, but it's usually easier just to go like this. So. And then the other thing is, if you look up the 2 tubes, the coolant tubes that come out of here, in the one that goes into the fuselage in the back there, there's something stuck out. That's my that's my coolant temperature. So that's all outside the airplane. They did their best to try and streamline it a little bit. But anyway, so it's really cool. And if you get a chance, look at this thing. Peter and those guys did a phenomenal job. And you know, these airplanes today don't have any socially redeeming value to society other than the intrinsic value. But to me, what we create here, a lot of stuff at EA, this is art. This is just art that you can get in and fly. And that's how I appreciate what these are. And one of the things we try and do is do everything to a very high degree of authenticity, because we're basically recreating and reliving what the human expression did back then. Again, no brakes, tail skid. I'm going to get in there, and I've actually got a booster mag that I can actually spin in the cockpit. And what it'll do is it bypasses the magnetos, and it's actually going to make the spark plug spark without the engine turning. And if we set this thing up just right, we had it running the other day, we can put the prime in, we can turn it through a little bit, we can set the propeller just right, and if I spin that and it bangs, it'll actually start without propping it. So we'll see if we can get that done today. Yeah, there's no caster oil in this one. This has got regular oil. Okay, now what I'm doing right now is there's a hand pump in the cockpit, and I just put about a PSI of, oh, I just sat on sorry about that. So I turned the fuel on, and I gave the grease thing a squirt. I just hand pumped some pressure up to pressurize the tank slightly to get the fuel up to the engine. And I have to mention, this airplane does not have a firewall. I can see the back of the engine in front of me, which is nice on a cold winter day over the eastern front where I can keep my feet warm. So anyway, so I got the fuel on, squirted the deal, pressure. I got pressure on my gauge, a little air pressure. I got a handle in here. I'm going to pull back to the retard position. There's an advanced retard. Got it all primed, Paul? And the caps are shut? Okay. You want to pull it through, Ken?
Switches off.
Switches stay off, and I've got the throttle back. So Ken's going to pull it through. It's just going to kind of, you know, move the fuel around inside the cylinders. And when this thing runs, if you look at the top, all the rocker arms are exposed. You'll actually see the valve of the rocker arms moving up and down on the top of the engine. Okay, so I'm going to turn the mags on. I got the throttle back. I'm going to spin the booster right now. Okay, that didn't work, so I shut the mags off. Ken's going to try another position. Okay, I got hot, and here goes the booster.